Okay, in this class, we're going to look at how you evaluate definite integrals. So just as a quick recap from the previous class where I kind of introduced the idea of a definite integral, if you've got an indefinite integral, so indefinite, the type that we did mostly up until this point, so when you evaluate an indefinite integral, that's one where you do not have the numbers here, then what you get when you evaluate it is a function, okay? But when you evaluate a definite integral, so that is one which does have the numbers here, and you run through the process and you evaluate it, then you get a numerical value, so you get a number. Okay, so that's just a bit of a recap from the previous class, but it's really important, that idea. So indefinite integrals give you functions as the kind of evaluation, the solution if you like. Definite integrals should give you a number, and we're going to be using this number to represent various things like areas, volumes, and stuff like that as we move forward in the Calculus 2 series. So just starting to build upon this idea, and I should actually just say that in the previous class I kind of made the connection between these two and the difference between, say, f of x turn into its derivative f prime of x, or then taking some numerical value like f prime of 2 and substituting that into the derivative. So this here also gives you a function. This is a function generally. Well, it's always a function, even if it's a constant function, whereas when you evaluate a derivative at a certain number, then you're going to get some real number numerical value. So the contrast between these is a little bit like the difference between these. Okay, so just thinking, that's just the background, okay? So just thinking about how we go about evaluating these things that we're now calling definite integrals. So before we look at that, just to talk a little bit more about these. So these numbers that we put on the integral sign, these are called the limits. They should always be in numerical order, going from bottom to top. So -1 obviously is a smaller number than 2. You should never have that the other way around. So that's one thing to be aware of. And that's going to become important later on when you start to use the idea of a definite integral for applications such as finding areas and volumes, so making sure that they're in the correct order. But yeah, we call these the limits, and when we go about saying this, like saying it out loud or saying it in our heads, we would say the integral between 1 and 3 of 2x dx, or with respect to x, okay? So the integral between 1 and 3. So in general, if you want to take the integral between the limits a and b, so the integral between a and b of some function f of x with respect to x, so integral between a and b of f of x dx, well, we know that when we evaluate an integral from indefinite integrals, the technique, by the way, is the same in the sense of you still use the power rule or whatever rule you're using to evaluate the actual term. Like when we evaluate these individual terms, we're going to be doing so using the power rule, just in the same way. It's the process that goes around that kind of changes with a definite integral. So when we evaluate this general f of x, we're still going to get the antiderivative, okay? So we've seen already to use a uppercase f for that. But how do we then fit in what we do with the limit? So what we do, and this is partly a notational thing, to learn, is we put it in a square bracket and we transfer the limits over here, okay? So we put the b there and the a there. And it's not easy to learn this process at first. It's a little, notational, and so you're just gonna have to bear with it and just churn out enough practice questions to learn how this technique works. So we basically integrate in the normal way. We don't need a plus c for these. There's no constant of integration. And we put it in the square brackets and we transfer over the limits. What we then do is substitute in the top value, the upper limit, the b value in this case, into that antiderivative. So we get f of b minus f evaluated at a. Remember that in reality these are now going to become numerical values, and we just take this forward, and it can actually be quite difficult sometimes depending on whether you get to use a calculator or not to evaluate this as a number. But eventually this is going to become some number, so this will become some real number. And that's what we're looking for, to turn these into a numerical value. So quick recap before we get going with the examples. Take the integral in the normal way to give you your antiderivative, then put it in this kind of bracketed notation. Then you're going to sub in the upper limit first into whatever this function here is. subtract from that. It's always a subtract, okay? That's really, really important. Subtract from that the lower limit evaluated in the antiderivative. Okay, right, so taking a look at our first example. So quite a straightforward thing to integrate here, 2x. So we can just go ahead and do that sort of directly using the power rule. So we're just going to go and set this up already with the square bracket. When we integrate this, remember that x is really an x to the power of 1. So we increase the power by 1 divided by the new power. If we're dividing by the new power, which is a 2, we're going to have 2 over 2, which would be 1. So basically this just becomes x squared. Okay, so there's no number in front because it would be, the number would be 2 divided by 2, which is just 1. So we get x squared as our antiderivative. We've got the 1 and the 3 transferred over there. Now we just need to sub in those numbers like this line of work in here and evaluate what we get. So putting in the 3 first. Let me just write this one out. So it's going to be 3 squared. We're going to subtract from that 1 squared. 3 squared is obviously 9. 1 squared is just 1. 9 minus 1 comes out to be 8. So that definite integral has been evaluated all the way down to the number 8. Okay, so fairly straightforward process once you've done enough of these. That's a very basic example. They're going to get clunkier when you start having fractions in here and fractions in here. It starts to get a little messy, especially if you can't use the calculator for them, but you'll get used to them. So doing the same thing here, just checking as well that these are all in an integratable form. So these are all fine for using the power rule. You will see definite integrals that are not in integratable forms. You're going to have to deal with that as well. So increasing the power by 1 and dividing by the new power. I'm just going to set this up in the bracket. So that's going to give us 3x to the 4 divided by 4. Okay, that's our antiderivative. Just putting on the limits again. And then we just need to evaluate this. So maybe doing this one a little bit more quickly. So if we put a 2 in here, it's going to be 2 to the power of 4. 2 to the power of 4 is 16. 16 times 3 is 48 over 4. So that first term will become 48 over 4. So I've just subbed the 2 in there. 2 to the power of 4 is 16. 16 times 3 is 48. So we get 48 over 4. Subbing in the 1, the minus 1. Minus 1 to the power of 4 is just 1. So if you've got a negative number and an even power, then it's just going to become a positive. And because you're just times them by 1 this time, it would just be minus 1 multiplying 4 times to itself, and that's going to give you just 1. 1 times 3 is 3. 3 over 4 is what you're going to get. So it would be minus, because it's a minus member between the two of them, 3 over 4. And then just combining those together, 48 over 4 minus 3 over 4 is 45 over 4. You'll see that a lot of these, in fact probably maybe even more than half of these, come out to be a fraction. And that's because when you're integrating, you're increasing the power by 1 and then dividing by the new power. So you're often creating a fraction in here. Your antiderivative is often a fraction. This one happened to not be a fraction because the 2 and the 2 cancelled. But you'll often see this, you then sub in the numbers, and unless there's some kind of simplification going on there, then it's going to remain as a fraction. So get used to seeing fractions in these question types. Okay, looking at our third example, again, these terms are fine to use the power rule on, so there's no change in the form. We're good to go straight away. We've got 2 terms here. Doesn't matter how many terms you've got, you just integrate them term by term. Just make sure you capture them all inside the square bracket. Sometimes you'll end up with quite a few terms here, so just be careful with that. So we increase the power by 1. Starting to get used to, I think, the technique now. So increasing the power by 1, dividing by the new power. For the second term, if we increase the power by 1, remember, and again, this is a x to the 1 here. If we increase the power by 1, it goes up to a 2. But then dividing by that 2, but that's going to be 4 divided by 2, which is 2. So you'll get used to maybe doing that in one line. At first, you might need an extra line of work in there to write the 4 over 2, just until you get used to the technique. It's not that the numbers are difficult. I'm sure you can handle 4 divided by 2, but it's just carrying all the process in your head at first. It can be quite difficult. So eventually you'll get quicker, and you'll just probably do it all in one line. So carrying the limits over, 2 and minus 2. So a little tip here, if you're evaluating, which you mostly will be, an expression, an antiderivative which has got more than one term, so 2 or 3 terms is not uncommon, even more potentially, but 2 and 3 terms is quite a common scenario. just put these in brackets, okay? So we're going to do the first bracket there to represent like this part here, and then we've got a minus in between the two terms, and then a second bracket here. And the reason why I'm saying that is all to do with the minus. If you've got multiple terms, you've got to remember that this minus will apply to all of them. If you don't put in the brackets, you probably don't need the bracket for the first term, but if you don't put in the bracket for the second term, it's going to be really easy to forget, which everyone does at first, the fact that that minus would need to apply to both terms. So just play it safe, be careful with that. So subbing in the 2 first of all, so 2 cubed is 8, so that's going to give us 8 over 3. 2 squared is 4, times 2 is 8, so it's just 8. Okay, subbing in the negative 2, negative 2 cubed is negative 8, so we're going to get negative 8 over 3. Negative 2 squared is 4, times 2 is 8. Now this is quite a common scenario when we're dealing with these. You're going to get similar numbers with different signs, and also that you're going to get a mix of whole numbers and fractions. There's different ways that you might want to process this from here. Just whatever way works for you numerically is fine. I'm just going to start basically by getting rid of the brackets. That's maybe a good way just to deal with it. So this minus applies to that minus to make it a plus 8 over 3. This minus applies to the 8 to make it a minus 8. And it's really capturing those two minuses, the double negative and then the negative there. That's really why we need the bracket. It's a lot to carry in your head, that, dealing with all the plus and minus if you did not have a bracket here. So it's good practice, standard practice to do that. So notice here that the 2 8s, the whole numbers cancel. We just need to add together the two fractions. So 8 over 3 plus 8 over 3 is 16 thirds, 16 over 3. One thing that this scenario is quite common here, to have a mix of, like I said, the whole numbers and the fractions. One common strategy is to add together, say even the scenario was more difficult than this. Say we had another term, like another whole number here, another whole number on the end. It might be best to combine all the whole numbers first, like say down here in the next line, combine all the fractions, so you've still got one whole number, one fraction, and then combine those at the end. There's different strategies, you'll figure out your own best way of doing it. But the final answer there would be 16 over 3. Okay, so that is kind of an introduction to how we evaluate definite integrals. You're going to use definite integrals a whole bunch in this course, so definitely spend some time getting down with this general kind of technique here, this general framework, and then starting to practice different types of question. And they'll probably drive you a little insane, these at first, especially when you start to see a lot of fractions and maybe even fractional powers. Yeah, it can be quite hard work, but it will pay off in the end because you are going to be doing a lot of applications with these, so it's useful to get down with the technique. Now you'll also start to see quite a lot of the same types of functions, similar numbers. You'll just maybe get used to the numbers, you'll get a feel for the numbers, and you'll know kind of by instinct whether the answers you're getting make sense or if they don't quite seem to fit in. So that is definite integrals. Hopefully that makes sense. Definitely check out some practice questions on this topic before you proceed to the next class.